You've been hearing us talk about imperial yeast for a while now, and that's because we absolutely love the stuff. With 200 billion cells in each pitch-right pouch, we rarely need to make starters these days. While originally based out of Portland, Oregon, imperial yeast has expanded to the East Coast, meaning even more people have access to their incredible lineup of yeast, including popular strains like A07 Flagship, A38 Juice, A09 Pub, and a Brulosophy favorite, L17 Harvest. So good. Whether you brew at home or on the commercial scale, imperial yeast has what you need to make the best beer possible. You can check out all of their available strains and start your planning at imperialyeast.com. You know him as the host of the Brew Lab and regular co-host of this show. Since joining Brulosophy as an official contributor back in 2019, Cade Jobe has published over 20 experiment articles, as well as a handful of articles for our other projects. To say Cade loves beer and brewing is a massive understatement. In fact, he recently moved from his home in Austin, Texas, all the way out to Corvallis, Oregon, to attend the famed Oregon State University Brewing Sciences program, and he is now a student of Dr. Tom Shellhammer's. This is the Brulosophy podcast, and for this episode, we're going to be sharing with you a live Q&A session Cade recently held with patrons of Brulosophy. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a really neat platform that frankly allows us to keep bringing you this podcast every week. Those people who appreciate what we're doing enough to make a small monthly pledge are known as patrons, and in return for their support, we give them a little something extra as a way to say thanks. You can learn all about the various rewards we offer patrons over at patreon.com/Brulosophy, so I won't spend too much time on it here, except for to say that our two most popular levels of support are the $3 tier, which gets you into these monthly Q&A sessions with people in the brewing world, and our $5 tier that also gets you a discount at YakimaValleyHops.com. Past Q&A guests have included folks like Russian River's Vinny Chilurzo, the alchemist John Kimmich, and a bevy of homebrewing all-stars like John Palmer and Gordon Strong. Coming up later this month, my friends from Crow and Wolf Brewing Company will be joining me in the studio to answer any questions patrons can throw at them. And as for the Yakima Valley Hops discount, they're always worth at least $5, usually quite a bit more. For example, in the month of October 2021, right now, patrons get $5 off each 1 pound bag of fresh 2021 whole cone hops. So let's say you wanted to pick up a pound each of Cascade, Centennial, and Eldorado, you'd save $15 for a $5 support of Brulosophy, which is, that's more than a pound of Cascade is going to cost you on its own. So not a bad deal, especially when you consider that support keeps us doing this thing that, judging by the fact that you're listening, you get some value out of. Again, if you're at all interested in learning more about becoming a patron of Brulosophy, which we'd appreciate immensely, head over to patreon.com/Brulosophy. If that doesn't float your boat, you can still help us out by using the links found at brulosophy.com/support. We're affiliated with most of the places people buy brewing stuff online, like Amazon, More Beer, Great Fermentations, and Adventures in Homebrewing. When you use those links, which you can also bookmark for future use, we get a small commission on each purchase that helps us to cover production costs. Finally, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts that allow you to leave a review, we would really appreciate it. I just checked Apple Podcasts last week and saw that we're at nearly 900 reviews, which is amazing. But I know there are a bunch of you out there who have yet to take the 3 minutes to do this. On top of giving us an idea of what listeners think of how we're doing, which we absolutely take to heart, those reviews also make it easier for people who may not have heard of the Brulosophy podcast yet to find us. Feedback is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who offer brewers beautiful stainless gear such as the turnkey BH15 pilot brewing system, which has a hard plumb manifold to eliminate all hosing changes during the brew process. Brewers Hardware has a ton of unique purpose-built products useful to both professionals and homebrewers. Go see for yourself at brewershardware.com. And don't forget to mention Brulosophy when you're checking out to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. Mark Pellicle had some feedback after listening to episode 204, where we talked about carbonating with honey and sucrose, particularly in regards to a comment somebody said about Matt's decision to boil the honey prior to using it for carbonation. Mark says, I have to defend Matt's decision to do this. While honey does in fact have antimicrobial properties, it is definitely definitely not sterile. The antimicrobial properties mostly come from the viscosity of the honey. Once you dissolve it, it has the opportunity to release dormant microbes. As a mead maker, I can tell you that I've fermented out meads with the native microbes in honey. I also think there isn't much merit to the whole boiling releases volatiles in honey idea. I've made braggots and other meads and boiled the hell out of the honey and still kept a lot of the honey character. I've done triangle tests at home with braggots boiled and not boiled and have not been able to tell the difference. That being said, maybe I just have bad taste. An experiment on this topic would still be exciting to see. We absolutely have plans to start integrating mead experiments into the whole Brulosophy experiment program. So that is coming, and a boiled honey experiment is high on that list. Now, this certainly is not the first time I've heard from someone who questions the idea that boiling honey somehow drives off desirable volatile compounds. It sort of reminds me of the claim people make, or used to make at least, I don't hear it so often these days, about purging the headspace in a keg of hoppy IPA, that somehow in doing that, the hop aroma in the beer will be reduced. Marcus sent me a bunch of meads and melomels that he's made, and I'm telling you, not only have they all been very, very delicious, but most of them have had a rather strong honey flavor. And if he's boiling these, it's not losing much honey. I mean, I haven't done a comparison, and without that evidence, without that actual evidence, I'm kind of wont to trust his experience. The guy's got a lot of experience making meads and all of the other types of honey wines that go along with it, and they're really good. So, like he said, perhaps there are people out there who are sensitive enough to detect a real difference, and those of us who can't just have crappy palates. But hey, if it works for you, it works for you. I'm not totally against the boiling of honey, because I'd be more concerned personally, as somebody who doesn't use honey very often at all, I'd be more concerned about potentially ruining a batch should something get carried along with that honey, as unlikely as that may be. So, as always, Mark, thank you so much for the feedback. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brulosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. I know it's been a while since our Farewell to Jersey episode, where we introduced you all to the reviewer who will be replacing Jersey. Oddly enough, since the weekend we recorded that episode, there has not been one where Timmy, Justin, and I have all been around, whether camping, traveling for work, or family weddings. The three of us have yet to find a time to get together to review the grip of beers that are sitting in my fridge. And believe me, we've got quite a few at this point. But we did recently schedule a review session. It's coming up very soon, and I couldn't be more excited for it. I do apologize for making you all wait so long. Real quick, before we head to break, I wanted to remind all of our listeners about the Brew Club. Over the last couple of years, since COVID halted in-person club meetings, a bunch of homebrew clubs around the world shifted to virtual meetings. I've had the pleasure to be a guest at a number of these meetings, and they are really cool, far better than I expected as this whole thing started to kick off. Well, recently, a group of dedicated members of the Brew Club who felt this was a great opportunity, they put their heads together and have been working diligently to organize the Brew Club. Currently, membership is completely free, and to join, all you have to do is be a part of the Brew Club Facebook group. It's that simple, which is over at facebook.com/groups/the Brew Club. That's the BRU without the umlaut club. They've got all sorts of cool stuff planned, including giveaways, guest speakers, increased meetings that anybody can join as long as you're a member of that group. Whether you're already a member of another club or you're just looking for a community of like-minded brewers, you are beyond welcome as a member of the Brew Club. Again, you can join now at facebook.com/groups/the Brew Club. That's the BRU without the umlaut club to be a part of all the fun. Alrighty, we'll be back with Cade's live Q&A session with patrons of Brulosophy right after this break. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brulosophy sent you. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Xchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to Xchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Craftmaster Growlers takes traveling with and sharing beer to a new level. Made from heavy-duty stainless steel, Craftmaster Growlers are double-wall insulated and can keep beer cold for up to 8 hours. Unlike typical growlers, Craftmaster Growlers come with a swiveling tap and fully integrated CO2 regulator cap, allowing beer to stay fresh for 2 weeks or more. The square design takes up less space and will fit in most refrigerator doors, and every Craftmaster Growler comes with a 1-year warranty. There are 64 and 128-ounce versions available over at craftmastergrowlers.com.
All right, so we'll, I guess I'll just go ahead and start talking. If anybody's got any questions, just pop them into the chat, and I'll answer anything that you've got. So I guess just to start off, I might as well talk a little bit about myself since I'm the guest here on this one. First of all, thanks to everybody for coming to this Q&A. This is a live Q&A session through the Patreon livecast group, so hopefully you're in the right place. I'm Cade Jobe. I'm a contributor here at Brewlosophy, co-host of the Brewlosophy podcast, and also hosting the Brew Lab podcast, which is our new podcast that we just released this year. So I figured I'd start off just by talking about how I got here. I've got a little bit of a unique story in terms of how I got into the brewing industry, and you know, home brewing and all that stuff. So I graduated from UT in 2009, University of Texas in Austin. And went straight into law school after graduating UT, and then spent 3 years in law school. And the last year that I was in law school, well, the last couple years of law school, I was starting to get into craft beer, tasting things. The craft beer, I guess we could call it the modern renaissance, was really, really taking off. And so I was trying a bunch of craft beers. I loved cooking. And one of my friends for Christmas said, "Hey, you like cooking, you like craft beer, take this Mr. Beer kit and see if you can make beer at home." And I had no idea that was even possible. I mean, I, for whatever reason, just thought it was something that, you know, Bud Miller, Coors, and big breweries could do. I had no idea you could actually brew beer at home, and oh, how naive I was. But yeah, so I got that kit and I started brewing and started practicing law, and ended up practicing law for about 7 years. And just developing that homebrew hobby and passion. And I'd say sometime around 2017, 2018, right around the time that, you know, my wife was pregnant and my son was about to be born, I started looking around, wondering if I wanted to continue to be a lawyer, and then wondering what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. You know, there were things I liked about being a lawyer. I liked being sort of an expert. I liked having an opinion. I liked sharing that opinion. I liked teaching. which was fun. And so I started looking around going, hey, these are things I like to do. I love research. I love intellectual pursuit. I like teaching. Is there a way that I can match that with beer? And it turns out that there is. And that's currently what I'm doing. So in 2020, at the end of 2020, I decided to quit being a lawyer and moved over to a cellar job at Blue Owl Brewing in Austin. So I always like to say to people, I went from an office to went from an office to sweeping floors at a brewery. But yeah. Did that for about 10 months in the industry, and then made a big move up here to Oregon State University, where I'm currently a post-baccalaureate student, which means since I've already got an undergraduate degree, I'm not technically doing another bachelor's degree, but finishing and doing a food science degree up here in fermentation science. So studying brewing science, which is what I want to do. So ultimately, I want to try to get into graduate school. If I can get into graduate school here at Oregon State, that'd be fantastic. If not, somewhere else in the country. And I want to teach beer. It's real simple. Think beer, teach beer. That's the mantra that I have sort of come up with, and that's what I want to do. So that's kind of a little bit about me. That's kind of a unique path. I don't think many people are I mean, there's a lot of people that have left, careers, going from engineers or lawyer or doctor or, anything, even artists going over into breweries that I've met. But yeah, so maybe that's not unique, but the lawyering aspect and then, cleaning tanks at a brewery was quite the big jump. But yeah, Kevin says that how many people were gifted a Mr. Beer kit only for it to turn into an obsession, and Kevin said he was one of those too. Yeah, that's one of those stories I hear all the time. I hear people talk about it, that they got started with the Mr. Beer kit, or the Northern Brewer kits is another one. The all grain kind of 1 gallon kits. Yeah, and so lots of people get started that way, which is really cool way to get into the hobby. And if only we had known then what we know now. I mean, it's so funny. Like the Mr. Beer kit's like $100 or something, and it comes with all the ingredients and everything that you need. And now I've got, electric brewing systems and propane systems and fermentation tanks and coolers and kegerators and all kinds of craziness. But yeah, that's part of the fun though. So when I started brewing, the science meets art aspect of brewing is what I find really, really fantastic. It just really speaks to me for some reason. It's that interplay that's like, we have all these things that we can control as a brewer, or that we think we understand. But at the end of the day, yeast is just this living organism. It's doing its thing. And we don't get to control or tell it what to do. It just does what it does. And all we're doing is kind of managing the environment that it's in. But you can do this in such a way that that you can understand the science of what's going on, but then apply that science I always think of it like a chef, like cooking, right? I mean, I understand that whenever I sear a steak, there's a Maillard reaction that's causing browning on the outside of that steak, but that steak creates flavor, and the intensity of that flavor is my province as a chef. And that's always what I've loved about beer and brewing. So that's why I originally got interested in brewlosophy. So I guess it was about 3 years ago or so. Yeah, gosh, I've been with brewlosophy over 2 years now. Wow. How about that? That's kind of cool. But yeah, it was about 3 years ago I started looking and thinking, okay, if I'm going to get out of being a lawyer, what do I need to do? And I was like, well, I need to figure out if beer is actually something that I want to be a part of. So let's start from a homebrewing perspective. Let me see if I'm just going to cold reach out to Marshall and see if I can get to be a contributor. And of course, Marshall's answer was no. At the time, I think they were full with contributors and such, but I just kind of kept plucking away at it. Got some equipment and started doing some homebrewing experiments and started writing for the Brew Club, which if you're not a member of the Brew Club, I'm sure most people on this episode or on this live cast are, but if you're not, you should really get in over there. It's a really fun group of people, and if you want to do an experiment, you get to do one, and we'll publish it on the Brewlosophy website. So that's how I got started, and then met Marshall at Asheville at one of the BYO Brew Your Own Magazine boot camps, and we just really hit it off. I mean, Marshall and I just really connected. And then I got started doing did some more experiments with the Brew Club, and Marshall said, hey, let's do this thing. So that's how I got started being a Brewlosophy contributor. But that was the whole impetus there was the science. I love doing experiments and seeing the science behind brewing. And so I just went and did it. And here we are 2 years later, contributor and now hosting the Brew Lab, which is really cool too. Hopefully everybody's checking out the Brew Lab. I've seen a couple of names on the chat already that of people who have reached out to me and given feedback and all that, which has been fantastic. Hopefully everybody's liking it. What do y'all think? Everybody enjoying the Brew Lab so far? I'll ask the question and then wait for some comments to come in. But the Brew Lab sort of spawned last year during the pandemic. Whenever I was getting ready to move up here to Oregon State, reached out to Marshall and I said, hey, let's get. I'm about to move up here and do this brewing science thing, right? I'm going to go up and study and do actual lab science that gets published and things. So would it be cool if we did a podcast that was just focused on that was just focused on brewing science? We got to read papers and interview industry guests and do a little bit of practical aspect, but also just really just nerd out, right? Like nerd out on the chemistry and the microbiology and really get down into the weeds. And that was the idea. And it seems to be, pretty popular so far. Been pretty excited and happy with the results. So yeah, Peter says the Brew Lab's been excellent. So yeah, thank you, Peter, for that. And hey, Matt, what's up, man? Good to see you. And yes, Matt asks, do I miss Austin yet? And yes, I absolutely miss Austin. That's a great town. Now, Corvallis is awesome too. Corvallis is a really cool town. It's kind of a small town. I mean, Corvallis is only 60,000 people, whereas Austin's I guess if you include the surrounding area, 2 million. But the funniest thing, and I've been telling everybody this, was in Austin, I knew all of the beers. Okay, like all of the beers, I knew the meads. I knew, like your meadery, Matt. I know that you're over at Meridian now, doing stuff there. But I knew all of the beers. So when I walked into a grocery store, I would just walk to whatever I wanted. If I wanted, a Peacemaker Pale from Austin Beer Works, and I just wanted some light ale, I would know exactly, okay, I'm just going to go in and get that. Or, I'm going to get a St. Arnold's Lawnmower because I want a Kolsch right now. I'm going to get a 512 IPA. All of these beers are Blue Owl, right? I'm going to go get a sour beer, Tiki Hop Totem. And I would walk in and I'd know exactly what beer I wanted, or at least look on the shelf and have tried all of the beers. I walked into a grocery store up here, and the only ones I knew were I just knew the names of the breweries, Widmer Brothers or Ninkasi's, some of these big Deschutes, right? Some of these big breweries, but I had never really even had the opportunity to try the beers. So that's been kind of a fun experience, but that's been a big thing that I've missed from Austin, is knowing what I'm going to get whenever I do it. Rogue is another good one too. Rogue, of course, is Rogue Dead Guy. I mean, most people know that beer. But they've got all kinds of other things too, Bat Squatch and all sorts of other beers. So it's been really fun getting to know that, getting to do that and experience new beers. So yeah, some some people commenting, Paul, keep up saying, yeah, Cade, keep up the great work. Eric, sometimes it makes my brain hurt. Yeah, good. I hope that it does a little bit, right? So I want it to get a little bit sciencey. Hopefully, though, it's not too bad, right? Hopefully, you're able to at least, if you have to pause and re-listen to it, maybe learn something, and it's helpful to you as a brewer. But yeah, no, I've been not. I mean, I don't know. I'm not one to say struggling with it, but yeah, it's always something that's in the back of my head. Is this too detailed? Do I need to stop and step back? Do we need to do a separate podcast? But if you've got something like, for example, if there was something in an episode that you were like, man, I really don't understand that, shoot me an email and I may be able to do a whole episode just on that topic, which would be kind of fun too. So yeah. But yeah, thanks, Eric. Hopefully it's not making your brain hurt too bad. And yeah, Kevin says loving it. And then Andrew got his gear in Germany, like Kevin. So they got their Mr. Beer kits up there, and then they're chatting about being in Germany and such. But yeah. So, I have missed Austin. I love the Pacific Northwest, though. God, it's so beautiful up here, and there's so much good. I spent last Thursday going around all in a bunch of hop fields here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, they're everywhere. The hop fields are all over the place. I'm in the Willamette Valley, and I'm 20 minutes from a hop field, pretty much any direction that I go. And those things are really cool. I'd never been in a hop field before, so this was my first experience. But that's exactly the kind of stuff that I wanted to do moving up here to the Pacific Northwest, is be a part of all that. And, like I said, continue to get to do brewing science. So hopefully the Brew Lab continues and everybody continues to enjoy it. I plan to continue doing it, and I plan to continue studying and doing beer. We've got some cool episodes coming up pretty soon. So we're going to do one on low alcohol brewing. I'll be recording that one here in a week or so. I'll send an email. Oh, I didn't send my Friday message yesterday, but I'll post that on Facebook if you guys have questions. The guy's name is Federico Tondini from AEB, and he's going to be talking about no alcohol brewing, doing that one next week. So yeah, so those should be coming up. So Eric's got a question. Eric Pierce says, many of the Brewlosophy experiments have produced surprising results that run counter to a lot of conventional wisdom. Could it be that if you aggregate some of these red herrings that you can in fact, see more, that you can in fact produce significant results? And if that's true, is it possible that Brewlosophy is potentially damaging the hobby? Ooh, that's a tough one, Eric. Yes. I mean, I think one of the things, no, Brewlosophy's not damaging the hobby. Let me be very clear about that. So that's a hard no. The first part is, if you aggregate some of these red herrings, could you in fact produce significant results? And I don't know for sure, but my guess is yes. And I would almost say yes, absolutely. As a very strong guess, because I do think, right, like a lot of these things matter, and they matter when they're all put together, right? So what we're doing when we isolate a variable is we're looking and trying to isolate one thing, right? We're trying to figure out, does yeast pitch rate of a high versus a low result in in a beer that tastes statistically different again, right? So that's all we're doing whenever we're looking at a Brewlosophy experiment. We're not measuring objectively to see what chemicals and what esters and stuff to happen there. And at least thus far, we haven't had the ability to repeat those things over multiple trials, right? I mean, if you're looking at, like, for example, Brew Lab experiments, they're doing multiple reps of each thing. So everything's done in triplicate usually, which means they're doing the same experiment 3 times, and then they'll do it over a wide range of things. We just don't, unfortunately, have the resources to be able to do that at Brewlosophy. That's something I would love to do. So I would say two things. One, if you aggregate everything together, for example, if I adjust pitch rate and temperature and pH and, when I dry hop, is that going to turn into a different beer? Yeah, absolutely. But would each of those things individually in isolation create a statistically significant beer? So far, at least what we've shown on Brewlosophy, no. But again, that's the other half of your question. Is Brewlosophy hurting the hobby? And I feel really strongly about that one. Just no, it's not. All we're doing is contributing stuff, right? Like you'll never hear me or Marshall say that the result that we had what is gospel, right? That the result means you should change your brewing practices or that it's right or wrong. We just can't say that. I mean, we just don't have the confidence to do that. But I can say that the beers tasted different or didn't taste different whenever we changed this variable. And I think that's really useful, right? Like it's really cool as a brewer to know that you don't necessarily have to worry as much about the beer fermenting at 66 degrees versus 68 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Or mashing temperature or mashing pH, right? That's another one that we've shown over multiple experiments that doesn't seem to have as much of an impact at homebrew scale, pH. So those things are things that I think are really fun as a home brewer. This is where we get to really explore. A commercial brewer may not be able to rely on that, because a commercial brewer, if they're brewing that batch, that same beer 10, 15, 20, 30, 100 times a year, they need it to taste exactly the same every time, right? And so they may not be able to deal with variability, but a home brewer has a lot of ability to play around. And if I can save you 30 minutes on a brew day or an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours if you're doing short and shoddy, then no. I mean, I at least that's my 2 cents, and hopefully that's rambling. That one was kind of cool too because nobody got to respond back to me, so I just got to rant there for a little bit. All right, then Eric asks, could your tasting panels be better documented? For instance, some people think that your tasters are a bunch of already drunk homebrew club members, etc. Yes and no. So tasting panels, one of the things that we want to do at Brewlosophy is we want to have a wide range of people and people that are drinking, right? It's easy to serve them at homebrew club meetings, but people who attend homebrew club meetings aren't like, some of them are BJCB judges and master judges and cicerones and things like that. Most of them have been brewing beer for a while or at least familiar with beer, but those are the kind of people that, we find our results interesting, so those are the kind of people that I want on my tasting panel. And again, if I were setting out to prove things, or like right or wrong, then that might be a different conversation. One of the things I've always talked about with the tasting panels, though, and we kick this around occasionally, is whether or not we should train the tasting panel, meaning should we tell them what you should expect or not expect. So, for example, in a lot of commercial studies, a lot of research that's done, so for example, at Oregon State, Cal Davis and around the country, and in breweries, the brewer or the person who's tasting the beer knows what they're looking for, right? They said, here's a beer where we changed the yeast. And so does this beer taste the same as this other beer? Right. And that has value, in certain applications. But the thing I like about Brewlosophy is keeping it blind gives us a higher confidence, right? We get a higher confidence that these people, that the tasters are actually able to or unable to taste a difference. And so that one's really important to me too. In terms of being like more well documented, the other thing I'll notice about like commercial tasting panels is they're very similar to ours. I mean, the commercial tasting panel that we use is very standard across the industry. And that's a good point that Eric brings up. But if you have a tasting panel in a loud tap room, things could be missed just because of how the brain works. And yeah, that's certainly true. And again, that's the purpose of, replication. But I will say there's been a bunch of studies. Like, for example, there's one that's coming up that was about light light and versus dark beer, the color of beer and how it impacts. That's coming up in the Brew Lab in a couple weeks, which is a really fun study. But that one, for example, was published And that was done at a brewery as well. I mean, they served their beers just at a brewery. I think that there is some evidence that of the way the brain works. And Eric, you've given me a fantastic idea for the Brew Lab. Let's get somebody on to talk about how the brain works in terms of tasting beer. Doesn't that sound like a fun episode? Yeah. And then Eric also makes a comment, certainly anything that shows significance is something to keep an eye on. And yeah, I think that's where it's really cool, right? I mean, when you're actually able to show that something does seem to matter, that's pretty cool. And that's pretty powerful as well. If something's able to make that big of a difference at our scale and on just one test, then that's pretty cool. I mean, you can use that information as part of the brewery. But yeah, that's kind of our sort of thought process behind it, and what we do. Always the other thing I'd say too is we're always open to criticism. I mean, if people, I love when people ask these questions and are thinking about these things, and they may result in changes in the future too. So, I love especially Patreons because you guys are out there listening and following us and thinking critically about everything that we do, which is fantastic. So yeah. And let's see. Anybody else have a question? If not, nobody's asked me what my favorite experiment is. I figured I would get that one at least. Oh, Eric says, I've seen how Sam Adams does tasting panels with a quiet room and booths, etc. And yes, and like I said, I think there is evidence to support that, especially whenever you're talking about subtle changes, that there could be some loss there. But again, I think that it depends, and it depends on what you're trying to do, and then also a little bit of resources as well. I mean, I suppose I can say that as well too. I don't have the ability to set up a quiet room with booths and bring in tasters. I have to go to my tasters and bring the beer to them. But so maybe that's maybe a limitation, although I don't see it as a big one, subject to change. If I get somebody on here that says, oh yeah, Brew Labs, you guys are totally screwing that up. You need to be in a quiet room and booths and all that stuff. So, and I have seen those booths as well, Eric. Yeah. In some of the larger breweries, like Bud Miller Coors, they'll do that as well. Set up booths in quiet rooms. They have like an entire room that's dedicated to just tasting, where they'll keep it dark in there and they keep the lights sort of down low and all that stuff, which is nice. And I think they're the ones that have done some of the studies on it, on whether or not quiet room actually impacts the results of the tasting panel. All right. Well, I mean, nobody else has asked a question yet. So how about favorite experiment? I'll go with that one and see what people think. There's Kevin. What is your favorite experiment? It's I think it's the water chemistry ones. To be honest with me, I have this. I don't know if I should say it like that or not. But I have this suspicion that water is way more important than people give credit for, and we just don't know it yet, or we just haven't, understood exactly what happens there. But water is 90 to 95% of beer, and so the different sulfate to chloride ratios. I mean, I've done those experiments myself too, outside of Brulosophy, where I've just dosed a beer with chloride or with sulfate or gypsum or calcium chloride. To actually taste it and see if it tastes a difference. And those ones actually do taste pretty unique. So those ones have been my favorite so far. And I also just get to nerd out on cations and anions and that sort of stuff as well. Ooh, Eric, what is your biggest brewing disaster? Good question. At home or at commercial? Maybe we'll do both. And I'll start with the biggest commercial brewing disaster. So remember, I was working in the cellar at Blue Owl Brewing part of the cellarman's responsibilities is to dry hop tanks. And if you have, you may have noticed this at home, but when you add your dry hop to fermenting beer or, finishing up fermenting beer, there's a whole lot of gas that's in solution. And when that gas hits that hop material, it creates foam and a big geyser type explosion as all of that gas just goes and tries to shoot right out of the fermenter. They call it geysering a tank in the industry, and I definitely did that as a brewer. That really sucks because you're just kind of like up on this tall ladder at the top of this fermenter, dumping the hops in, and then it blows up. It like sprays you in the face. You've kind of got your hand like over the manhole cover, and beer is just it like hit the ceiling, and it's sprayed over all the other tanks, and it's on the floor. I had my phone sitting on the top of the tank, and whenever the beer came out, it washed my phone off the top of the tank, so dropped the phone like 75 feet, down onto the floor into 2 inches of beer that's now floating on the floor. So that was a pretty bad brewing disaster. I'm sure we lost several barrels of beer just on that. But if you haven't ever geysered a tank, you consider yourself very lucky. Biggest homebrewing fail at home was the second batch of beer I ever brewed. And that beer, that was also with the Mr. Beer Kit. And I didn't know this at the time, but Mr. Beer Kit sells that cleanser. That cleanser is not a sanitizer, okay? And so I had cleaned the keg after, I had done the beer, but I just sort of left it sitting someplace, like sitting open somewhere. And whenever I filled it up the second time, I didn't have anything to sanitize it with. So who knows what had it in it. It was dust and stuff in there. And that thing smelled like a nasty ass gym sock. It was gross. It was rank. It was vinegary and gym socky and disgusting. So that one I had to throw out. I think that's one of the only batches I've ever, thrown out. I hate throwing out beer, but that one was really bad. So that was my biggest homebrewing disaster.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all-grain beer in a single, compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high-quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to Grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to Grainfather.com, that's Grainfather.com, and get started today.
Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD, at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. The brew in a bag method has blown up over the last few years, and in that time, it's become very clear that not all bags are created equal. For the best BIAV experience, you have got to go with the brew bag. Made from high-quality, food-safe polyester, the brew bag is available in both 210 micron for standard brew in a bag, as well as 400 micron, which works beautifully for all-in-one recirculating systems. I've been a brew bag user for years and wouldn't brew without it. Head over to brewinabag.com to get the fabric filter that works for you and use promo code TBP17 at checkout to receive a discount. Again, that's brewinabag.com.
Kevin asks, favorite style, Kolsch. Yeah. I think I can pretty confidently say that it's still, although I will say the IPAs are growing on me up here in the Northwest. I mean, IPAs are everywhere. So in Texas, this is another big thing, a big difference in Austin. Everywhere you go in a brewery in Texas, there's going to be like 3 or 4 or 5 light beers. So like a light lager, an American lager, a Pils, a Kolsch, a Hefeweizen, an American wheat, a Smash, a pale ale, something like that are going to be sort of light, easy drinking beers. Exactly the opposite here. There's going to be like 10 IPAs or 7 IPAs and maybe 1 Pilsner, maybe 1 like wheat beer of some kind. So I'm definitely starting to like IPAs more up here, but I'm still a Kolsch fanatic. So yeah. Matt Crispin asks, how much do you believe there is a massive delta between homebrewing and commercial brewing concerns? Thinking high level, mash regime, fermentation, water, etc. I think there's a lot. And I think it's based on a bunch of different factors. I think as a home brewer, one of the biggest things I learned from being in a commercial brewer is cost. Right. And that's just not something that homebrewers generally have to worry about. I mean, sure, you can kind of worry about spending $35 on a batch versus $50 on a batch. But as a brewer, cost of ingredients is really, really important. And I'm sure, Matt, you know this too. I mean, in the meadery, if y'all are adding, fruits and things like that. I mean, fruits can be really expensive. They're great in beer, and I like fruited beers. I'm one of those people that really enjoys those. But yeah, cost is a big one. And then another big thing is ingredient sourcing. So as a home brewer, you can just run down to the homebrew shop and buy whatever you need. But if you're a brewer, you've got to be able to consistently source the same ingredients. And I think that's sort of an underappreciated thing from a homebrew scale, is that variability over time. So yeah, ingredient variability over the years and from lot to lot and from batch to batch, and where you're sourcing your ingredients is super, super important. But yeah, and I think those things impact like mash regime, your fermentation profile, your water profile. All of that changes because your ingredients are changing, and you're trying to make exactly the same beer, or at least, taste close enough that your customers aren't going to notice a difference. So I'd say there's a really big delta, and it's kind of an underappreciated delta there too. I do think you also have to change recipes, unfortunately. I mean, from what I've seen, I've seen a lot of people try to scale up and have had some success, but it usually always gets changed because of a water profile, or because of some process requirement that the brewery has, or because of tank size. That osmotic pressure in those tanks is real. I mean, that's a really big deal and can really stress out yeast in a way that we just don't have as home brewers. So yeah, I think there's a pretty big delta there. Cool question. And then Andrew was saying how much headspace would have been needed to avoid that. So the geysering of the tank, I'm assuming, is what he's talking about. He said, we used to dry hop Winter Hook at Red Hook with about 50 pounds of hops into a 1,000 hectoliter tank. Believe they had about 880 hectoliters of beer in the tank or so. Never had any issues with the geyser. So there was several barrels of headspace in the top up there. I mean, I'd say probably at least 5 barrels. Maybe not that much. There's probably like 3 barrels of headspace up there. So maybe that would have helped a little bit more. I think it also depends on the size of the tanks and the way that they're shaped. So these tanks were really tall and really skinny. So there was a surface area at the top, and then the manhole was only a 4-inch manhole. So it was kind of a small port like that. So all of your gas is going to escape out of the manhole. The other thing with that beer is with some of those beers, and especially that beer that I was dry hopping that I geysered, we were trying a new process, which is what unfortunately happened. So we were mixing in some fruit. It was one of our great fruit beers, and we mixed in fruit, and we would normally just dump the fruit into the top and then close up the tank and let it ferment or whatever, and then go back and add our dry hops after the fermentation was done. But in this case, we decided that we were going to recirc the fruit. We added the fruit and the dry hops at the same time at the top of the tank. So we'd add in the fruit, we'd add in the dry hops, and then we'd close up the tank. And that fruit would provide enough of the stuff that it wouldn't cause any issues. But we were recircing, so we decided to recirc. So we injected the fruit in through the racking arm port, and what that did was it stirred up that whole beer, and so got all that nucleation there. Now, that to be said too, I think headspace can help a lot if you have enough headspace, and also just working quickly enough, and then also wherever you are in fermentation. So if you're closing off a tank at the end of fermentation, you're trapping all that CO2 in there. That'll also cause a geyser issue as well. There's a couple of ways you can also do it too. If you just open up the blow-off arm on the tank so that any gas is pushing up out through that blow up arm, and then you can also put a valve over on wherever the PRV valve was, or if you've got an opportunity at the top of the tank to just put another valve so that you can just quickly dump your hops in, close it, and then kind of off gas with that valve. Let's see if I can get this in the camera. Off gas with that valve. But that was crazy. That was not a fun experience. And you just come home soaked with beer. And I had a 45-minute drive home, and I didn't have any change of clothes, so I was just like drenched in beer and hops, and had to like ride home 45 minutes in my truck. My truck smelled like hops for like the next month. I guess Eric was responding back to a couple of comments earlier about the tasting and experimenters, and he's saying, people read these experiments and then take them as gospel and then become frustrated when their beer only gets a 23 because they were judged by a panel that has fewer distractions. For all I know, these experiments would have yielded the same results. I don't know, hence my questions. Judging is a whole separate topic, Eric. And I think Marshall and I have done a Brews Views topic on this, or I know Marshall has done at least one judging Brews Views. The other thing I'll say about tasting panel is everybody's generally trying to do the best that they can. I mean, Matt has participated on a tasting panel for me. Everybody's trying to just do the best they can. Everybody wants to know, if they can taste a difference based on that variable, because it's kind of fun. It's just fun to be a part of. So people are trying. It's not like people are just blowing it off. The whole like shitty palates argument. I mean, people can argue as much as they want, and they can believe whatever they want to believe. All I can do is say, don't take our experiments as gospel, like you said, Eric. But you know that. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir with you. That was Matt brought up a topic about like the switch between home brewing and the industry. That one was really, really interesting. And And he brought up sort of the differences in scale, and I really do believe strongly there is a difference in scale, and it's based on just so many factors. But there's also some really cool stuff about the industry. So most brewers, like commercial brewers, they're really friendly and really passionate about beer. There is a lot of cross collaboration. So at Blue Owl, we worked with a bunch of people like Lazarus, which was right around the corner. People from Real Ale, the Brewers Association, Master Brewers Association of the Americas. There's the Brewers Association, the ASBC. All of that stuff. People just love to come together and talk about and drink beer. That was one of my favorite things I see as a brewer. Eric says NHC was a judging shit show this year. I can imagine that sounded pretty tough. I obviously wasn't involved in it at all, but yeah, that sounded rough. Having to do all of those in one location and everything. I don't envy the competition organizers for sure. Yeah, things coming up in the future. We've got some cool podcast coming up on the Brew Lab. So let's see here. So I got some cool ones coming up. So I told you, I mentioned that one about light versus dark. So that one's a guy did a experiment where he served a beer that was light and served a beer that was dark, and then asked people to rate it, which was really, really cool. Because I'll give you a sneak peek at the results. The tasters, this was done in Europe, so it was done in Belgium. But the tasters said that dark beers could be charged more money for. So there was a 6% price increase that tasters were willing to pay for dark beers versus light beers. So people thinking that dark beer is like more luxurious or worth more money than light beer, which I thought was just hilarious. But so that one's a cool one that's coming up. We got one on magnesium in brewing. So that's color change. If you're worried about color change in your beer, you may want to look at your magnesium content. That's a pretty new study that just came out from a Canadian brew lab called Raft Brew Labs. And Ewan Thompson's is the person on that one. Then I did a boil time and trube experiment from a guy named Alex Spears, who's a Canadian researcher. That one was a lot of fun. We've got the one coming up with low and no alcohol beer in a couple weeks, and then I'm going to do another gluten-free brewing podcast, which is. And that one, we're going to look at gluten-free mash methods. So we've got a guy who does gluten-free brewing called Beerly, JP Beerly from Beerly Brewing Company up here in McMinnville, Oregon. So that one's going to be a lot of fun as well. Daniel asks, how large is the brewing program at your university? What does curriculum look like for this type of studies? Are there professors dedicated to the brewing fermenting subjects, or are they pulled in as crossover instructors from similar studies? So Oregon State's pretty unique in that way. I think Oregon State and University of California, Davis are the only two programs in the country that have a dedicated ferment. Oh, no, Colorado State has one. Virginia Tech and Washington State have a dedicated fermentation science program, which means that they actually have a degree. So my degree is going to be in food science and technology, but my major is fermentation science. My focus is fermentation science, and it's brewing science. So yeah, there's several professors up here at Oregon State. So Dr. Shellhammer, Tom Shellhammer is one. He's the main brewing chemist up here, and he kind of runs all of the brewing related studies. Jeff Clausen runs the pilot brewery. They have a full pilot brewery here on campus, and then there's a whole bunch of wine professors. There's 3 or 4 wine professors, Elizabeth Tomasino and some of the others. They have a winery on campus as well. Then you've got Pat Hayes, which is a barley breeder, so he gets his funding from the USDA to actually breed new crops of barley. And then you've got Sean Townsend, who's the hop breeder. So that guy's also with the Also with USDA, he's doing hop breeding. So if you've had Strata, that's a new hop that's coming out. I think it's still proprietary, but it's a new hop that's coming out called Strata. That was bred at Oregon State by Sean Townsend. Then you've got Paul Hughes, who's doing distilling and brewing. Chris Curtin, who's a microbiologist looking at different yeasts. He's kind of got a focus on Brettanomyces and lactobacilli and things like that. So there's a wide range of people, but there's a full program. So there's undergrad, an undergraduate, a bachelor's degree, master's, and PhD, all in brewing science here at Oregon State. There's not a huge program. I mean, like I said, Dr. Shellhammer is pretty much the only one doing brewing science. But then you've got, Cal Davis as well. Glenn Fox is over there. He took over for Charlie Bamforth, and he's doing a lot of fun things. So James Bruner and Glenn Fox was on the podcast on the Brew Lab, and James Bruner was one of his master students, which was just a couple of weeks back when we talked about how yeast impacts the freshening power of hops, which was a cool episode. But yeah, there's a lot. I took an intro to beer, wine, and spirits class this summer. I'm taking brewing chemistry and wine in the fall and spring. And there's distilled spirits and all kinds of fun stuff. So yeah, it's a really cool program. Really glad to be here. All right, Eric asks, what's in the keezer and the fermenter? So in the fermenter, there's currently nothing, which sucks, but we're moving next week, and so I don't have anything currently in the fermenter. In the keezer, I've got a cream ale, an American Standard Lager, and an IPA, which are actually really good, and I got to get drinking on those before we move next week. Any more thoughts on the GMO yeast efforts? Eric asks, any more thoughts on the GMO yeast efforts happening out there? The podcast was fantastic. It's a Brave New World. Yeah, that was a cool one. So Nick Harris at Berkeley Yeast was the Brew Lab episode, I think it was episode 20, where we talked about GMO yeast, and that was really fun. I was really surprised at what we can do with yeast, and then follow that up with Dr. Laura Burns, where we talked about diastatic yeasts and the things that she's able to do there. Those two, there's just so much going on the forefront of yeast right now. But yeah, GMO is really cool. If you can eliminate diacetyl, in English IPAs or any of that stuff, there's thiol releasing yeasts now that can increase your hoppy character. And there's even a yeast, I think we talked about it on the podcast, that creates hop flavor from malt. No hops. So you can totally eliminate hops, use this yeast with its enzyme, and it will create hop flavor. And according to their results, hoppier than hopped beer. Of flavors. So yeah, it's totally cool. I don't see GMO replacing hops by any means, just because I think you get so much other opportunity from hops and things that are added there. They did say it's kind of one-dimensional what the yeast can add from barley. But in any event, there's so much. This is just another tool in the toolkit, right? I mean, think about we've already got these New England IPA juice bombs. Add a little thiol releasing yeast there, and you're going to get some increased grapefruit or tropical fruit, passion fruit character in your juicy New England IPA. And yeah, that could be the bomb. I mean, that could be really good. It could be the new heady topper. I love it. And thank you, Eric, actually, for suggesting that show idea on GMO yeasts. So Peter Stanaway asks, what's your thoughts on home distilling? I like it. Yeah. I've never home distilled. I think I think there's some danger associated with home distilling. I mean, if you over distill, you can make some really bad alcohols that can cause, if you drink it, you can die. And so I understand that aspect of it. But I've had plenty of moonshine over my time. There was a guy who used to live down the street from my dad, who made peach moonshine, and oh my God, was that good? It was really, really good stuff. So yeah, home distilling, I would love to see it legalized, but I do think we have to worry. We have to be careful about some of those health implications. So I think it was on a recent podcast, one of the most recent ones on the Brewlosophy podcast, where I was talking about bad alcohols being produced, and so denatured alcohols, so things that had additives and crap added to them so that they weren't technically considered alcohols during Prohibition and all that stuff. And there's some pressure in home distilling to add things to that so that you don't get caught, right? Currently, because if you do get caught with a home still, that is illegal. But yeah, it can definitely go wrong, and so I think there's some worry there. But yeah, that peach moonshine was fantastic. It was really nicely sweet, nice. Yeah, and Peter says there's an education needed first. Yeah, and I think that's what really needs to happen. With beer, you can't really make. You can add adulterants to beer to make it gross and nasty, but you really can't make it like dangerous, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to make beer dangerous. But those distilled alcohols, especially, you really, really can, especially when you start adding other things in it to try to hide the fact that you're making shine. But I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it legalized. That'd be a lot of fun. It's also really cool, too, to be here at Oregon State. Back to Daniel's question about the program up here. So there's an opportunity to see, whiskey distilleries and all that sort of stuff to see, to have access and opportunity to do tastings and things like that, which is really cool being part of a program. So Daniel asks, are you being approached by any professors to record Brew Lab sessions? You're netting professionals from very diverse locations and backgrounds. Just curious if any are reaching out first to share their work. Awesome. Or get some awareness to new findings. Not yet. But the podcast is still pretty new. I mean, I've only been doing this thing for 3 months now. I mean, releasing episode for 3 months. I think we've got 22 or 23 episodes out. So man, that's more than 3 months. That's like 6 months. Wow, it has been that long. So yeah, but not yet. But I think they will at some point. I'd love for them to reach out. I do have. It's really nice being here at Oregon State because I've got a basically a font of free content from Dr. Shellhammer's lab. Anybody that wants to come on at any point. But yeah, there are a lot of people though. There are a lot of people that have been connecting me with other people, which has been cool. Saying, hey, you liked this topic, you need to go talk to this person. So for example, Cade who is the one that I just interviewed this week. I posted about it last week on Facebook with the DART, which is the direct ambient real-time technology, or direct ambient air real-time mass spectrometry, which is how you can measure hop compounds like at the brewery without having to create a vacuum with the gas chromatography machine. Anyway, it's kind of complicated, but it's pretty cool. It's a new technology and it can be used at pretty much any brewery to measure hop volatiles. So imagine instead of having to like rub and sniff hops or to like sniff over the top of a beer to see if you've got some sort of sulfur or something coming off of it, if you could just drop it into this machine real quick, and it'll tell you whether it does or doesn't, whether it has this character or not, or whether it's right, or whether it's ready to go, it's ready to be packaged, it's got the right amount of CO2, all that stuff. It's pretty cool technology that they can use to do that. So yeah. So for example, Cade was somebody that I was pointed to by Harmony Bettenhausen, who was the episode number 4 on malt metabolomics. And she's pointed me to a couple other people. So that's been pretty cool. It's been really fun too to see like the community of people, that are interested in brewing science as well. But yeah, I've been pretty excited. It's been pretty cool being up here in Oregon State, at Oregon State University, being part of the brewing science community, and being in the industry is really cool too. And I would say I was probably a little bit worried as a home brewer of like what how industry would perceive me if they would think like, oh, this is just a little crappy home brewer. But that's really, I mean, there are those people, but they're dicks. Okay, for the most part, most brewers are really cool and really love talking about beer, just like you and I do. They love to talk about it as well, which has been a lot of fun. It's been really cool to meet people and know people. And I hope that the Brew Lab continues to be as successful. It seems to be getting good feedback, lots of people listening and downloading, and we're just chugging along. Continue to do that. So I hope it continues forward, and I hope that this is something that continues for a long time. It's been really cool for me too, because I just get to meet a bunch of people. Like I talked to Keith Villa, right, on skunking. Which, looking back, he just released the book on cannabis, so I maybe should have interviewed him on that. But yeah, this is the founder of Blue Moon that I was just chatting with, for an hour about skunky beer, which is just super cool. Eric says, will malt forward ever make a comeback like hop forward did? God, I hope so, Eric. I really do. I love malt forward beers. And a good American amber ale. I love that. I really, really, really hope so. That malt forward makes a comeback. I think we got to deal with sweetness, though. I think that's what the issue is. I think malt forward has that sweet perception, and so I think you've got to deal with that residual sweetness that was kind of being sticky and gross for a while. I think that's what hops add. They add that bitterness and they add that lift. That aroma, that lift away from the sweetness, so that it's not as cloying and sticky. So I think you got to deal with that. You got to make it nice and crisp, and balance that bitterness. But I would love to see malt forward beers come back. Oh man, I would love to do that. I mean, like those fest beers, Märzen's. I mean, there's always Oktoberfest, right? And I'm not talking pumpkin beers, but yeah, I would love to see malt forward make a comeback. Yeah, there was actually a question a while back. That I had, not today, but talking with some friends about light beer. So light lagers. They never really went anywhere, but they're trying to rebuild market share, right? But I remember those less filling, right? More taste, less filling commercials from some of the macro lagers, and I remember chuckling at that. It's like, that's what a malt forward beer is to me. It's got so much more taste and beer flavor, and I love those beers. I really love them. The bitterness just kind of pulls too much away from me. It makes it a little bit harder to drink. I can just crush malt forward beers, but I've got a bit of a sweet tooth, so I'm probably unique in that way. Eric says, last time I tried to make a sour amber, it sucked. Work in progress. Oh no. The sour amber at Blue Owl, which is called Van Dam, is that I think that was my favorite of the core 3 beers that they make. They make Little Boss, which is sour wheat, a Spirit Animal, which is sour pale ale, and then Van Dam, which is the it's kind of like sour amber ale. That beer was fantastic. So if you can get your hands on that, Eric, you should try some Van Dam. That beer is really, really, really good. Or Professor Black too, which is the sour cherry stout. That was a really good one as well. Daniel says, any plans within the contributor team discussions to bring on some experiments with objective variable data testing instead of the subjective blind taste testing? I like what y'all are doing with the triangle test just fine, and it fits with what has been tested so far, but just curious if y'all are itching for new testing / write-up avenues. Yeah, I think there's one that's coming up. I don't want to spoil, but there is one that's coming up that we're going to do some testing, some objective testing on, and that one's going to be important because it tests something. It tests tasters' ability to perceive something, a particular flavor component. And so we need to measure that flavor component in order to test it. So maybe that's enough of a hint that you can kind of figure out what that experiment's going to be about. But yeah, I think there's there's always appetite for that. It's just a matter of getting the beers to the lab, getting them tested, and then having the meaningful results. But yeah, would love to. That's kind of what the idea of the Brew Lab is to do, is to show, in addition to what we're doing at Brewlosophy with our experiments, here's some actual objective data results, right? This is the thing that we can't provide at Brewlosophy, or at least haven't been able to provide yet. So here's where you can find it in the commercial industry. Oh, Matt, he says, you are definitely missing ABGB and Live Oak. ABGB just released a Chuckanut collab. God, yes. I miss Rocket 100. I miss Live Oak Hef. I miss the Grodzetsky from Live Oak. Oh God, I love those beers. Fantastic beers. I was actually just telling, I feel like I talk about I talk about Live Oak, I talk about Blue Owl, I talk about a bunch of breweries. I talk about Meridian Hive a lot too. But up here to everybody because those are the ones that I loved from there. But yeah, Live Oak's Hef. Oh God, and that Grodziski, I can taste it right now. Maybe I'll make a smoked beer here soon. We'll see what we can do with smoked malts and see if I can get an experiment going on that. Andrew says, triple hops brewed. Oh yeah. As like the marketing gimmicks, the less filling, taste better, marketing gimmicks. Yeah. Triple hops brewed. I have a beer in my fridge right now that's a triple IPA, which is 10.1% IPA. And I'm just like, okay, great. Wow. It's going to be good though. I'm excited about it. But anywho, Eric says, hey, gotta bounce. Thanks so much for answering our questions. Keep up the great work. Yeah, Eric, thanks for coming on. And yeah, it is actually about time to bounce. Anyway, we got one last one. Alex says, what's your favorite hop combination in a NEPA? In a New England IPA. My favorite hop combination in a New England IPA. I haven't nailed down my favorite hop combination yet. The one I did recently, which was my favorite so far, was Sabro. Oh God, what was in it? Hold on, give me just a second. Let me pull it up. Sabro was in it, which is the one I really remember because I loved that coconut. Pineapple. Yeah. It was Sabro, Citra, and Idaho 7. Sabro, Citra, and Idaho 7. That one was really, really good. Really, really good. Matt, Daniel, thanks for hanging out. Good to see you. Kevin, thanks. He says, keep up the good works. And Andrew says, any feedback from listeners on the prospects for a Hop Chronicles podcast? Yeah, Marshall's been talking about it. It just depends on time and getting it out. But yeah, we certainly got enough content. It's definitely on the list of things that we're discussing. So write in and tell him if you want one. So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out with me. I enjoyed it. I had fun. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'm always available, Cade@brewlosophy.com. Be sure to check out the Brew Lab and the Brewlosophy podcast. And thank you guys so much for everything that y'all do. Guys and girls, I really appreciate everything that patrons do for us. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you all later.
Huge thanks to Cade, Jobe, and the many other wonderful folks in the brewing world who have taken the time to sit down with patrons and answer their questions. These sessions are always a blast, and we'd love to have even more people be involved. If you're interested, head over to patreon.com/brewlosophy to view all of the rewards you can get for helping us out. Don't forget to subscribe to the Brew Lab, where Cade takes you into the lab with brewing professionals to discuss the fascinating work they've done on our favorite beverage. And remember to head over to brewlosophy.com to stay current on everything we're up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no.